Recurring Value podcast, where every week we shine a light on what it really means to have post-sale success, where we talk to folks from the post-sale success team, from onboarding specialists to customer success managers, industry experts, and CEOs. In B2B SaaS, we need the right team in our corner because ultimately recurring revenue requires recurring value. I'm your host, Brett Sears, CEO and co-founder of Sequence and AdoptIQ, where we're focused on building a unified onboarding and engagement platform to help companies move users from onboarding to activation and then from engagement to expansion, with a focus on using micro video learning walkthrough videos to really help the process throughout the entire experience. That's why we're building this podcast, to learn from leading experts and to really drive this post-sale success revolution. Today, I am super fired up to have Rachel Kozen with us. I've known Rachel for a long time. I'm really excited for this conversation. Rachel's an accomplished executive in the tech industry with a proven track record of driving growth, retention, and outcomes leading for their companies. Rachel's built a career in developing high-performance teams and creating customer success and client success strategies that generate both revenue and value. Her expertise spans across cybersecurity, IT monitoring, and analytics software, where she's worked with some of the largest organizations to ensure their IT services and applications are always running smoothly and the users are extracting the value necessary. With a background in customer success, account management, and strategic planning, Rachel brings a wealth of knowledge in the process of development and data-driven decision-making and building strong partnerships. She's known for her ability to lead teams and exceed the challenging KPIs, making her a valuable asset in the fast-paced world of technology. I'm really excited to get into the weeds with this and really ask a lot of questions. So, Rachel, thanks for being a part of this.
I'm so excited, Brett, and I couldn't have said that better myself. I'm really excited. Obviously, this is not just my work, but it's something I'm really passionate about because I think it makes customer success, to me, makes a huge difference in every organization, whether it's your company that you're a member of the customer success team or your customers' teams. It makes a big difference in how those companies and businesses operate. So I'm looking forward to today. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun, yeah. So, and we're going to go. So I always want to start sort of giving people a background. So if you can give a little bit of your history and how you ended up being such a zealot advocate for this post-sale sort of process, because in conversations, like you shine in this conversation. So I'd love to sort of get that background for folks.
Sure. And it takes time, right? And it's something that has evolved. I have been in the customer success space for almost longer than they've been calling it customer success. So I've been building and leading post-sale customer-facing teams for 20 plus years now. And that's everything from implementation services, support, training and enablement, and customer success. And it really started for me, the customer success side, when I came in to lead a services team and they also gave me renewals, right? And at the time it was just, you have renewal responsibility. And if anyone's ever done renewals or had just renewal responsibility, the first thing you get from customers is, you only talk to me when you want money, right? And that's really where customer success came from, right? How do you get out of that discussion of, you only talk to me when you need money or I need to pay you, to something that is more of a partnership. And so over time, this has evolved for me, from just how do you engage the customer? How are you doing just normal reach outs over time so you don't end up in that conversation? And that's, I will say, more gradually went to, one, delivering business outcomes, right? And you have all of your KPIs that are associated with your company, right? What are you doing for the company that you work for? To then eventually you get to more external KPIs, right? How are you delivering value to the customer, right? Because that's really what drives retention. And that really ultimately is what drives additional revenue from those customers is, are they getting value? Not do you think are they getting value, but are they recognizing that they are getting value? And so it's this, I think it's an evolution in customer success, but it's certainly been an evolution in my journey, right? One, it's just close the renewal op, right? And then it's close the renewal op and hopefully get some upsell to how do you make those things easier? How do you make them more repeatable? How do you make them more predictable? And a big part of that is the engagement with the customer and that continuous value conversation along the way.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you think about this, because it's always so fascinating to me when we think about post sale success, right? So we're like, okay, we need to onboard a customer, we need to onboard an account. And so we've got to get the account and the users, and they're two different sort of bodies of experiences. And then we've got to navigate the support side, which is more user than the account side. And then customer success that needs to understand all of it and has very different roles. But all of that's called customer success, even though they're three very different silos. It feels like that's where the world gets confused a little bit on what actually the roles are. Does that make sense?
I think that's totally fair, right? And I will say some companies get confused on what their own roles are, right? And so one of the things I've always tried to do is come at it from the perspective of all these teams are different. They have different responsibilities, but the overarching, kind of responsibility for all of those teams is to deliver value to the customer and ensure there is a very high and consistent customer experience, right? So a customer shouldn't hear something different in onboarding than they do from their customer success manager. They shouldn't hear different messaging, different value statements from support than they do from their customer success manager. It should all be consistent in that messaging and experience, because I firmly believe the kind of pitfalls of the customer journey and the customer experience is in transitions, right? So anytime a customer or a ticket or anything that's customer related gets handed from one team to another, there's always an element of risk, right? And if you don't have the process to do that smoothly and you don't have the alignment across those teams to clearly understand how to move someone or some company or something through that process, balls are bound to drop, right? And so the goal of the entire customer facing org, and I say that's from sales all the way through customer
Whoa, whoa,
success.
whoa, whoa,
I know, right?
whoa.
To make sure that there's a safety net, right? And nothing falls through the cracks. And it's hard to do. And so a lot of companies don't do that well, because if you do it just well enough, you're doing pretty good, right? But it's how do you close those gaps, right? And how do you prevent those drops in between and deliver that consistent experience?
Okay. And so there's always different stages of companies. And you talked about this, right? So in an early stage company, right, they're going to have somebody who's probably going to fill the support and the onboarding role more than the success role, but they're going to think their customer success. And so that can get all sorts of sort of crazy with that. When you think about a customer success manager who's really focused on driving business outcomes, right? So that's the role. What are some cheat codes on how to get good at identifying what are the business goals? They're buying the software, whatever the software is, for a very particular purpose that has to draw direct results for them. They either need to drive revenue or increase fear or risk, right? Those are the two reasons people buy software. When you're customer success and you're building a team, how are you going in and identifying those with the person you're working with? Because the person you're working with, like, they have different goals too, right? So there's the company objectives and they've got a goal. It sounds like there's lots of different motivations there. How do you navigate that?
It's a lot of conversation, right? And one, as a customer success manager, it is a really challenging role to do well, because you have to build partnership, right? And so a big part of it is relationship building, but you don't get a pass and get to go directly to strategy and what are your company business objectives, right? You've got to build that trust and show you understand their market, right? You understand the things they likely care about, right? So it's a lot of it is understanding how your own products and platforms impact businesses, right? And then understanding their vertical and saying, okay, I know these things about you, right? And here's how I know I can have an impact. But so one, I've created some value for you because I'm telling you what I already know about what you're doing, and maybe some of those things you aren't thinking about. But then you just have an open conversation, like, what are, what kind of business objectives is this purchase tied to? Right? What are, how did, and sometimes this comes from sales, right? Sales can feed it. I mentioned that word again, right? But they do feed into this process and say, like, I know it came from this budget, right? And you can say, I know that you care about this because it's a cost savings for your organization. Okay, great. So then we can start talking about what are the levers that make sense for you, and what are your KPIs? What are you measuring? How are you showing your leadership, your achievements over the year and what you've accomplished? And how do we tie into that, right? And sometimes as a CSM, you need to make those connections, right? You can't leave it to your customer to always tie off all of those thoughts. Sometimes you have to bring them together for them. So really you have to have a deep value knowledge of what you deliver, right? Not necessarily technical, right? We've talked about this.
I know,
um,
I'm going to give you credit for a really good thing here in a second.
so there's the technical acumen that you have to have some of, but it's really the value is really what you need to be strong and deep in. And you need to be strong and deep in the value of your products and services across different verticals, because it can deliver different, depending on your products and platforms, they can deliver differently in different verticals. And if you can tie those things together for your customers, all the lights start firing green, right? Because then you've established a different relationship. Those things become really easy to measure week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter. Then the revenue comes, and it comes more easily. You're not negotiating renewals, you're negotiating upsells, you're negotiating cross sells, because you've proven the value and you've proven that you understand the value to them. And that's the critical piece.
Perfect. So I want to ask, like, because there's different people that are watching this, and there's there's a lot of CEOs that are starting to build their companies, just building this out, and there's folks that are there. I want to really dive into something because I'm not sure I've ever heard it that way. So, are you literally asking your counterpart, the person you're serving, like, what are their personal KPIs? Like, what are the things that they're responsible for, so that you can help, like, and maybe not overtly, but are you actively trying to find out, like, what's driving them and what success that they can report up, so that you can consistently feed that to them and make sure that you're triggering that? Is that an objective for you?
Yes. Right. Because that is a clear value statement for that individual. And ultimately, if it's their KPI, it's something the company cares about. And it likely, right, if it's, say they're using OKRs, that OKR should tie directly to a business objective, right? So then you're tied into what is the company trying to accomplish, right? And there's always budget for company objectives,
Okay. That makes a lot
right?
of sense. And I think that that's helpful for folks to go, because it's easy to say, I need to know what the company's trying to do. I need to make that. And you do, but knowing that we're people working with people, and everyone on the other side of the flex, like, they have a job, right? They've got 20 pieces of software, and you're just a vendor to one of them. And they want a promotion, they want to keep their job, they want to grow, they want to move up or be able to look good or not get fired or whatever it is, whatever their motivations are. And so you being a strategic partner for them in their growth is really powerful.
It is, and it's really a game changer in the partnership with them overall. And I've gotten to the point where we do joint QBRs, right? So we bring in their leadership, and you run through the whole thing with your kind of champion in the organization, and it is tied to their objectives as well, and you co-present, right? Because it's a time for them to shine too, right? This is what we've built, right? This is what I've been handed. These are the metrics we're trying to measure to, And this is what we've done. Like, it's a great opportunity to show their own growth within the organization. So they get really excited about, you know, and for early stage companies, you're always trying to get higher in the organization. It's really hard to get face time with executives when you're a smaller company. But when you can pull in, when your champion is pulling in these other people because they want everyone to see the business impact, you do a lot less heavy lifting.
Wow. That's awesome. That I think that anyone that's listening to this, because that's how life works, but it's so fun to sort of see it in that particular scenario. One other question sort of on this, because we talked about sales and I laugh, like I was a pre-sales guy for 25 years but built it, like, so I know both sides of this. But there's this thing going on LinkedIn, and you and I talked about this. So I want to make sure I give you credit and everyone hear this because it's fantastic that, salespeople, right? They don't need to be product experts. Right? They need to be able to, tell the stories and stuff like that. One, I think that creates a huge problem after the sale because, I always tell folks, I feel really bad for the product team because they built a product that is underwhelming based on the features that the sales team promised was there. They have to navigate all of the problems that the customer support team figures out on all the tickets. And then they have to deliver the roadmap that the customer success group promises that's coming. And so there's sort of three different things. But you said something that I think is really, really powerful. And you started about here is that all of the people in the organization should be experts at the product value, right? Not the features, but what that product. Can you just take a couple minutes and really, sort of explain what that means? Because I think it's so critical and not talked about enough.
Sure. I think most software today is getting more and more complex, right? It is, we all expect more, we all expect a better experience, but we don't fully understand the complexity of building that technology, right? And the rate of innovation for most software companies is phenomenal, right? Like, we're always adding new features, new functionality, and it's technically very difficult for most non-technical people or even technical field people to keep up, right? Is number one. Part of that is you don't want to get into buying and selling features, right? Or specific functionality. What buyers really want is, will this solve my problem and deliver value to me in some way, whether it's increasing revenue or reducing risk or controlling cost, right? I add one to your bucket because I think that control cost aspect is in there for a lot of companies. It's in one of those three buckets. There may be some features that I need, but I need to know that it's going to do one of those three things, and it's going to do the one that I care about. And those are stories that people can tell, right? Technical, non-technical, everyone in the organization can start to really embrace what is the value of what we deliver. And that's not necessarily just product, right? Product's a big part of it, but it's also, even if you don't have a professional services team, it is the service your company delivers. And that's through CS, that is through sales engineers on the front end, it's through sales support, all of those different pieces. That is part of the service. And when you start talking about the articulation of that, that's what really bridges the technical and the business. And the more you can tell that story, the more consumable it is for customers, right? Across the board, because then they can start seeing how it impacts their own business. And I think that's the area we often miss when we're looking for people to be technical product experts. Every company needs to have them, but it doesn't need to be everyone. But everyone needs to be able to articulate the value proposition of the products and the service that you deliver. And that is what's sellable, right? I think ultimately that is what people buy, and that is what you're going to be held accountable against ultimately. It's not, do you have a specific feature? Is, am I getting value from my investment? Am I getting what you told me I was going to get from a value, business outcome, objective perspective? Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah. And I think it becomes so critical when you position it that way because it's always in the margins. And so when you're really trying to articulate value, it's this use case and that use case, and that the examples start to grow. But you can always tell when somebody studied the fact sheet, but they don't actually understand the value. And that's where I found salespeople sort of get themselves in trouble, because then they start making up like the feature values. You're like, wait a second, you don't actually need to do that because we have a compelling story. You just have to know it so that we can deliver on it.
And the more you can and you're exactly right, right? You can run through the quick sheet. Everybody has that little one pager quick sheet for their products. That's the bullets of what are the features and functionality, and some value prop in there if you're lucky. But really, it's the telling of the story of, this is how customers like you use this and get this, right? Whether it's, those three things, they increase their revenue for these things, they increase, they reduce risk, they increase efficiency, control costs, whatever those things are, and being able to tell that story in a way that's real and measurable. That's the key, because what you don't want to do is get to a point and say, oh, you can do all these things and it's going to be great and you're going to improve in these areas, but you don't have any way to measure it, right? And the customer doesn't have any way to measure, like, if you're not measuring risk, how do you know you reduced it, right? If you're not measuring, like, if you don't have a good understanding of the impact this could ultimately have to revenue, how are you going to measure whether it actually impacted it or not, right? Revenue could go up or down, and it may not have any relation to what you're doing. So how do you measure those things? So you've got to be really clear on what are the measures for the value, is the other part of it.
So okay, because I was about to you just
Oh.
derailed me, but I'm not. No, this is good. Okay, so you've been doing this a long time, right? Customer success is right. SaaS is 20 years old with Salesforce, so this is a really new industry. But you've seen this grow. So, and you just said something that I think is critical. So what happens when you've got a right, you're a customer success manager, you're brought on, here's a company that just bought the software, and you and your team are rolling it out, and they haven't instituted those value metrics and measurements before. So they didn't even know that they had this problem, but somehow they got exposed. Someone, some way, some champion went, oh gosh, here we got to go do this. Here, we're going to go buy X to solve it. And the company hasn't told, the people in it haven't necessarily bought into the problem or the solution because they haven't been tracking and measuring. Like, in that moment, like, what are some things that people can do to sort of start laying the foundation? Because that's going to be a hard showing the progress when you still have to institute the measurements first.
Well, one of the things you can do is say, I think there's a couple of scenarios. One, the people you're talking to that day may not have any of the information that the people who bought actually had, right? And so you need to fill in those gaps as much as you can. And if not, you need to say, okay, these are the kinds of things that most customers or people in this industry are wanting to measure. Let's go take some baselines, right? While we're getting everything spun up, let's see where some of these things are, right? And depending on your tools and platforms, products, maybe you can stand up and just start collecting data, right? You're not doing anything with it other than, like, the baselines are these things for these three metrics. And we can say, okay, this is where you are today, right? And it could be, in some cases, I've seen customers show up with, Excel spreadsheets. I've seen them show up with, like, this is the number somebody gave me, or whatever, right? You can start with anything. And if you don't have that, you can start with some industry benchmarks, right? If these things are big enough, there's somewhere, somebody, some research platform has industry benchmarks. So you fill in those and you say, okay, this is middle of the road. Do you want to be middle of the road or do you want to excel? Okay, so let's start putting in targets of where you want to be. And let's build a strategy that leverages our tools and platforms and gets you to those outcomes that you want.
Okay.
Right?
It's a helpful mindset rather than, hey, I need to like make sure they can use our features.
Right.
Um,
It's the switch from features and functionality to strategy and value. Right.
Okay, so
And
one last thing on this, because I think this becomes, and we're finding this like, so AI, right, is the trend and stuff like this, but I want to ask a really specific question on this vein. So there's a lot of people that were doing jobs before software came, and then we buy software in order to automate the work that somebody's doing, right? That's sort of like what happened. And then an AI has now elevated that to a whole nother level. So what happens when you're trying to institute and do this, and the person you're talking to is sort of nervous that they're going to be training their replacement, for lack of a better phrase, because this software added to AI, which is this weird, like it's magic out there. No one really knows what the end result's going to be. How do you navigate that potential friction of a successful implementation creates fear?
that's hard, right? It is really hard. And I have worked in industries and companies where it is a very real fear that a lot of people have, right? I was in the infrastructure automation space and I was in the infrastructure monitoring space. So the more you take out of people's hands and put into a tool, they start to get nervous about what is my value, right? And a big part of this goes back to tools and platforms, and even AI today, not saying the future, but AI today, they don't understand strategy and they don't understand value, right? Value is just an input in AI right now, right? It is not, and maybe there's some cases, but I have not seen a case where AI has been able to extrapolate value from a conversation. People can, right? And the value that the person on the other side has to have is, and you need to help them with this, is the more we are leveraging tools to support our strategy and deliver value, and that is together, right? That is in partnership between CSM and customer. That is where we build our we kind of feature proof ourselves, right? Because we are adding a layer on top of the just dialing, just working the dials on these tools, right? When we're starting to be able to tie the products that we are installing and using every day, when we're starting to be able to elevate those in terms of value to the company, delivery of business outcomes, all of those pieces, most tools are incapable of that today. It takes people to say, this is driving this, right? And here's how we're doing it. And here's the strategy for us to take it to the next level. And I think that's the conversation. And you can tell when someone's nervous about their job. And that's a great opportunity to have what are the measures for your success, right? Let's make sure the work we're doing together helps feed into those measures. And then you've built a partnership, right? And it's not bulletproof, right? It really is not. And there's sometimes people do, become obsolete. Humans become obsolete in roles because of tools and technology, right? It's been happening for hundreds of years, and that fear has always been there. But it's how do you up level every conversation to be something that the tools and technology can't deliver?
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, I've found that when I hear when we're onboarding and working with someone and I hear God, I'm so busy. I don't even know. I don't even have time to do my normal job, let alone this stuff that you want me to do here. Like, that's been a really interesting marker for me to be like, oh, we have a mindset problem. Like, they just don't understand. And do they not understand the value? And I'm finding that it's not that they don't understand the value, it's that there is a threat-based assessment at that particular, like my experience in terms of that. So it gives me, I always look for those, what are the markers I can listen for that help me pivot my conversation to get them to expand somewhere else.
Right. And I will say that that particular line of conversation is not always from a place of fear. Sometimes it's from a place of prioritization within their organization. And it's one thing, and I have a lot of conversations with executives about this, is you can't just add more to people's plates, right? Like, it is a finite resource. So you can't have someone at 110% capacity and then say, I need you to install and roll out any kind of software, right? It takes time, it takes thought, right, to do it well. And it's you executive buyer, executive leadership, you need to help set the priority. And part of that is we get to communicate, I understand there's an upfront load. This is what it's going to take to get it up and running. And these are the kinds of people we need. And this is the time period, right? It's going to take, 6 weeks. It's going to take 6 hours. It's going to take 6 months. But if you're realistic and clear about what the expectations should be in terms of rolling that out, they can prioritize that for their team, because that's the other challenge, is sometimes it's not prioritized for the teams that are rolling it out, and so they're not going to do it. They're not being held accountable to do that. They've got other measures, back to these other things that impact their KPIs. That's what they're going to be focused on until someone tells them they have to, the KPIs have changed,
Yeah,
right?
now it's time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like, again, so many people, and we all sort of struggle that we don't want to tell people bad news, right? So it's one of those things that, we can get it done, we can get it done fast, we can get it there, versus like this realistic expectation of, here's the value that you're going to get, here's the price you're going to pay, not just in money, but in time, to be able to get that. Being able to link those two things together, the more confident you are in the value, the easier it is to level set the right expectations.
Absolutely. 100% agree. And being transparent in that and tying that value statement. And anytime you can deliver incremental value in that process, like, I've always really tried to build implementation processes and services that are, in chunks, right? Like, what is the lowest hanging value proposition fruit, right? And let's do that work first. And then the customer is starting to see some value from the work that you've done in the first, 4 weeks. And then we tackle the next bit of work that's you're layering on functionality, you're layering on complexity, but you're layering on value. So it could be a 6-month rollout for a complex service, but every step along the way, you're delivering incremental value that they can absorb and use. So you're not having to justify the work along the way. And you need to build out implementation plans that support that.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. Last question, and I sort of like having fun with this one, but what's one sentence, and I ask everybody this, but what's one sentence that you could advise a CEO that's thinking about the account success after the sale is made, right? So they're like, okay, we've done all the things, because I always laugh going, most of us were raised in business in a traditional sales funnel where we've got awareness all the way down, and we've seen it in the little bottom, there's the dollars, and we celebrate, and someone rings a bell, and we're like, we did it. But B2B SaaS is this recurring revenue model. Like 90% of the revenue comes after that little bell is rung. But most of the CROs, most of the folks driving revenue were raised in the pre-sale environment. not this post-sale environment. And so there's a mindset shift with that. So if you were talking to a CEO that is having to confront the difference between this pre-sale mindset and this post-sale mindset, and they needed to sort of expand it, what advice would you give them to sort of get them realizing the value of prioritizing, or at least giving attention to the post-sale will make a difference for them?
I don't know that I have just one sentence,
Okay, you
but
can give
I'm
more.
gonna, yeah, I'm gonna kind of try and encapsulate it in how I think about customer success. Customer success has two functions, only two functions: to deliver value and value articulation to the customer, and deliver revenue to the company. And if you don't take care of both of those pieces, you're not actually building a SaaS business. What you're doing is basically building you might as well be building enterprise software where you're just getting, the one-time payment up front, and there's going to be no lifetime value. Right? You are not an ARR based company if you're not thinking about how are you going to get next year's renewal, and how are you going to grow that client. You have to have a strategy. Customer success and renewals used to be a lagging indicator, right? It used to be something you didn't have to think about on day one because you had a year before you needed to go back to that customer for the next round. And you didn't think about it until maybe 6 months before, when your board was asking for the forecast, right? But that is not the world we live in anymore. And businesses will fail if they don't have a day one strategy. A day one strategy that they can articulate. CEOs won't have, if CEOs need to be able to articulate that day one strategy to their board, and how am I going to keep this revenue, and how am I going to grow this revenue?
Yep.
And customer success has to have a day one strategy. The minute that customer signs on the dotted line, what is the experience you're going to deliver? How are you going to articulate value? How are you going to ensure that renewal and create the path to upsell and cross-sell? And that starts the day they sign.
Yeah, we think about it as the first year is a POC, right? If we think about that first onboarding year is just a proof of concept. Now it's a fully paid proof of concept, but it's that emotionally shifts. I found shifts the way we approach it versus we think that it's a done sale. We're like, no, 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 no. They're just testing us for this period of time. And so that we have the ability to lock the contract next year with that. Like that's where they're actually a customer, is on that renewal. Then that sort of shifts where the energy goes, I found.
But I would say you have to think about it that way every year. You have to earn that business every year. And what I deliver to customers in 2024 is not going to be sufficient for 2025.
Yeah.
Right? Markets change, right? Technologies change, expectations change, their business objectives, their strategies change. I have to be able to continually evolve the customer success practice. The company has to be able to continually evolve the value proposition to deliver and keep that customer the next year. I almost look at, people draw the customer journey sometimes in a loop, sometimes it's just in a straight line. It's an infinity symbol, right? It never stops, right? Sales, they drop in, they drop out, right? They have their finite set of work, but customer success never stops. And it has to continue to evolve and grow, or else you've been outpaced. Someone else will do what you're doing better. Even if the product, even if the product continues to deliver and outpace from innovation, if your customer success service doesn't continue to evolve, someone will outpace you in that. Yeah. And for some companies, that's enough to switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny, like I spent 25 years in the asset management side, And that's a known thing, right? It's still recurring revenue. Assets under management is a recurring revenue model that has built-in support and environments and all of that stuff. Now, a lot of times the salesperson and the broker's doing it, but it's still that same dynamic. And I think that that's a unique way that the SaaS world can expand and realize its value is we're not inventing post-sale success in SaaS. It's already been done for a long time, but we got to prioritize it or we're going to run off a cliff. So that's awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, I really appreciate this conversation. I think that there's a tremendous amount of value. You're one of the brightest minds in this process. You've been really helpful for me, and so I'm glad people are going to be able to get to know you. Anywhere they can find you on LinkedIn. Is that the best way for people to find you?
That is the best way to find me. I love getting messages on LinkedIn and people who want to share ideas and thoughts. Like I always want to continue to grow and learn. So give me some feedback, how I can do better. Or if there's things that you're seeing in the market, I would love to hear about it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And for everyone else, right, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. We're really excited about bringing these conversations and really driving this post-sale success, right, to make it a priority, to make sure that we've got the right tools and the right resources necessary to really let users extract the value and to let our companies grow, because it takes a lot to build these companies. We're trying to solve problems, and we want to make sure that the users and the companies get the values to really be able to deliver on the promises. So thank you all for joining us. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.